What's going on, guys? Alex here today after a long break. Finally, a new episode of the podcast, and let's discuss combined online and offline studies, which is quite a trend nowadays, at least in Latvia. So before we begin the discussion of the new type of studying, I'd like to share some personal life updates with you. I've got a new job as a medical assistant in a cardiac ICU during summer actually, but right now it feels like it's really important for me. So with this info in mind, let's begin. So last year was 100% distance studies with no practice with the patients, with no attending hospitals, just distance studies 100%. This year it was a little bit different. The beginning of the year, actually September, and a little bit of October, I suppose, it was more offline than online studies because the lectures were absolutely online, but some types of practice, let's say so, was offline. So we were attending actually some patients, we were doing some stuff, we were taking anamnesis and so on. After that all followed with 1 month of absolute lockdown when 100% was online. And after that, here we have the situation which we actually are having since the lift off of the lockdown. Only some classes are offline, but still we are not allowed to visit any patients. So I'd say we are some type of online studies, but at the same time we need to attend some of the classes, but at the same time the attending of these classes is quite useless because you're not allowed to visit patients, you're not allowed to see the actual diseases, the actual treatment, the actual patients like in real life, but at the same time you need to drive 1 hour, 1.5 hours, or maybe even more to some hospital just to sit in class and to hear pure theory which can purely be done online. I know it sounds really strange right now because how were you studying during the first and the second course? But right now when I have something to compare with, I can say that it's an absolute nonsense because we're still having some type of lecture, some type of classes, we're having it online, where it's only purely theory, and it works quite well. But anyway, last year it was difficult to make you do something because you were doing everything only and only online. I was not leaving my apartment for the whole semester, for the whole year actually. And combining with depression, that was a quite dangerous combination because, it was quite difficult to make you do something not only because you don't feel like you're studying, because you're not in the environment of studying, but also you have depression and it's quite difficult to even wake up, let's say so. But anyway, I managed it, I got used to it. Now we have a new year. And I got used to the hospital during the September studies. During September studies, I was having obstetrics, and actually that was quite interesting, because we were seeing patients. I was actually assisting during a C-section. I was like second assistant, so assistant of an assistant, but still I was assisting during a C-section. I was having practice, I was making something. I was feeling that my studies have some practical appliance. But after that follows October with an absolute lockdown when we were not allowed even to leave our houses, our premises from 8 p.m. I think till 5 or 4 a.m. So absolute lockdown. After that follows November with partially returning to hospital but with no access to patients as a medical student, which is simply stupid because actual patients during internal medicine rotations is the most important part, because I'll explain a little bit about internal medicine. So internal medicine contains lots of courses like gastroenterology, pulmonology, hematology, cardiology, and so on. And the most important part during these rotations is to see actual patients and to see how actually the knowledge which you have got from the textbook, from the lecture slides, and so on, how they are applied in real life. But we right now, we are allowed to the hospital premises. So we are sitting in the hospital in class, but we are discussing purely theory. Of course, doctors try to explain us the best way. They try to explain to us and to give us the maximum information possible. But it's really hard to remember all of those plans, all of those all of these theory studies when you're not allowed to see patients. So without practice, it's not only difficult but also quite useless to attend hospital, because that was the main reason to go to the hospital, to see the practice. Anyway, solution to this problem of mine, and not only mine but the whole medical student community, is trying to compensate during shifts at work in hospital. So I work in the ICU, but I'd say that it's really hard because of the ward specific. My ward is intensive care unit of the cardiac diseases mostly. So it's cardiac diseases or cardiac intensive care. So it's still better than nothing, but the specifics is mostly cardiology, and that's pretty much it. Because if we're talking about gastroenterology or pulmonology, yes, because of the intensive care unit has a lot to do with pulmonology. Okay, in theory, you can do some stuff, you can practice some stuff, you can try to examine the patient, if he agrees, of course, or she, but still, it's a cardiac disease, you know the disease in advance, and it's quite hard to practice something. Still, better than nothing, of course, but such a privilege, let's say so, it's not available for all of the students, because not all of the students are from the Riga, where the studies are located and where the most difficult and the most interesting cases, in fact, are located. And that's why it's quite stupid, because the university and the government are quite stubborn. They're like, we will allow you to the hospital premises, but at the same time, you are not allowed to visit patients. Like, why? Like, explain to me why I have to go to the hospital in order not to visit patients. But anyway, there are also some pluses in this type of studying, like online, both online and offline combined. So let's start with the pluses then. So it's no need to spend time on commuting to hear some of the theoretical lectures. As I mentioned before, lots of theoretical lectures are offline and you need actually to attend them, but still, some of the lectures you don't need to commute, so it's like it's more adapting to your schedule, so you can hear the lecture from a car, you can hear the lecture while doing something, so that's quite okay. Of course, still ability to see techniques in person during some offline lectures. So because of, as I said before, some of the lectures, some of the classes are offline, doctors are able to show us, of course, on the mannequins in theory, some of the techniques. For example, as it was in obstetrics before we were allowed to visit patients in person, doctors just showed us some types of the sections, some types of the C-section, some types of the deliveries, the biomechanism on the dolls, so on the mannequins. And seeing that in person, it actually helps you to understand it more. But still, it cannot be applied to all of the subjects. Still, better than nothing. Of course, another bonus is that some lectures are recorded and available after the lecture. So it's an important during an exam session when you really can revise your material and understand that there is something of the lecture, some part of the lecture which you cannot understand because on the slides it is written pretty in a short, quite short it's written, let's say so. So you're able to rehear the lecture and understand the material and remember the material much better than it could be if the lecture will be available only offline and that's it. So anyway, I like that, I love that, that's pretty amazing. Of course, one of the other pluses is that you have more time to study and rest because of this combined method. Of course, it's quite devastating to try to make your schedule, so some of the days you should go somewhere and some of the days you can stay at home and watch the lecture and do all the stuff you need. But still, it gives you more time to rest and study and as well. Simply because the first point is that you don't need to commute to some of the theoretical lectures. So I like that. Still, it's worse than it was the year before when 100% was online, because actually you didn't need to leave your house at all. Anyway, more time than it was during the first and the second course, when 100% was in person. Anyway, and last but not least is that some tests, colloquies and exams are online. Why is it a bonus? Not because of the cheating, because most of the professors and the doctors actually look at you while you're answering. But the thing is, in the atmosphere, because it's quieter, more comfort to pass the test during at home, You are in the environment when you feel quiet, relaxed and more comfortable than it is somewhere in an unknown environment, in the hospital, in class and so on. But still, all of the tests are not from home. So that's why it's quite difficult to set the correct mood, because some of the tests you're passing from home, yes, of course, it's amazing, I love that, but at the same time, and it can even be during one and the same subject, you can pass one part of the test at home and still you need to go offline, so that's quite awkward, to be honest, because you are rested, you're comforted at home, you pass the test, that's amazing, and after that, you go to the stressful, unknown environment where the atmosphere is quite difficult, and you get there and you're stressed, and because of the stress, you also pass this test, this colloquy, this exam, but it's more difficult, and you show worse results, and so the first thought of the professor or the doctor, or professor and the doctor, are that you were cheating during your online test. But you were not, simply because you felt more comfortable at home. So it's partially plus side and minus side at the same time. So on this note, let's go to the minuses, and there are more and more minuses than it was pluses. First of all, it's more difficult to plan a week when the week is online, simply because the thing is that when everything is offline, you look at your schedule and you know that then you need to go to the hospital, then you need to go to your university class, and so on. But right now, you can also go somewhere to hear your lecture, but you don't need to. And so the thing is that it's more difficult to plan something. For example, it's more difficult to plan work because you don't know whether you will need to hear the lecture straight after your work and you can hear it online, or you should attend the lecture in person, so you need more time to commute there simply. And so it's more difficult. That's why I quite hate this system. Anyway, the next thing is that it's hard to pay attention during online lectures. So, forgive me my constant comparison online and offline, but still, it feels like online lectures are more important comparing to offline. So, when you're hearing the lecture online, the thing is that, for me personally, I feel that it's less important and I can rehear it after, and that's why I pay less attention than I would pay if this class would be offline. So that's quite a problem, because I have lots of lectures recorded and I don't have any time to listen to them, to rehear them actually, or to hear them for the first time. So that's for the paying attention thing is quite important. The next minus, and it is one of the most important minuses for me at least, is that my study spot at home is too close to bed. And so it's too easy to find yourself simply sleeping during the lectures. Understand me correctly, I don't want to sleep, but when you have options of hearing the offline lecture when the cameras are turned off, sitting or laying down, you prefer to lay down. And that's why sometimes you're like, okay, I will listen to this lecture like in bed. And after that, you just wake up after 1 hour, 2 hours, and you're like, okay, the lecture is over, and I'm the only one left in the conference. Like, what the hell? That's why the too close to bed location is simply awful. But at the same time, some of the lectures, to be honest, are so like, why are we hearing this? That's why there is a very pleasant option of sleeping during this lecture. Like, that's okay. It's not ethical, but that's pretty awesome. So, one of the minuses which I mentioned before is that you still need to commute somewhere. I won't talk very much about it, but your schedule, my schedule, is quite different from day to day, and that's why you still need to commute somewhere, and it takes a lot of time, especially right now, like during December. It's like snowing, it's very cold, and because of the snow, all of the public transport is taking long time, or is taking longer to get you where you actually need to be. And that's why you need not only to plan your commute, but also you need to plan the delay of the transport, that your delay due to snow, because you cannot move at the same pace as you would move during simple autumn or summer. And that's why it's a little bit awkward also, but still. Anyway, still need to commute somewhere. I don't like it at all. Also, one of the minuses is that for offline classes, it's mandatory to attend using FPP3 respirators, even if everybody is vaccinated, and everybody should be vaccinated according to law if they attend the lectures in person. So it really is irritating, especially when you're simply sitting in class for the whole time and listening to the theory. Like, I understand that FPP3 respirators, they work. Yes, I agree. We need these respirators. I agree. But when we are visiting patients, but we are not visiting patients, like, why are we using them? Like, the doctor is using them. Okay, I can understand that. The doctor is seeing patients, actual patients. We are not. And still we need to use them. We need to buy them, or as some of my colleagues do, like taking them from job. Still, anyway, you need to use them, and after like 2-3 hour class, it's quite irritating because you have to breathe through these respirators. Anyway, that's okay. And last but not least minus for me personally is that not all of the tests are online. So, for example, some of the online tests could be like test essay or an oral test, oral exam. But offline, you also can have test, essay, oral test, or even something like OSCE type of test. So, and also one thing that irritates me is that sometimes decisions of the professors change on the fly. So, like, you will have all of the tests online, and you're like, yay, thanks God, that's awesome, that's simply awesome. And 2 days before the actual test, you're like, you need to attend this test in person. And the problem is that I write with my hand much slower than I type. And also, it's more tiring to write by hand than typing. And I like, okay, so right now I have to revise all of the material just to shorten all of the stuff I'm going to write, simply because I will write it down physically and not digitally. And it's quite irritating. It's a problem of my university, I know that. But still, it's quite irritating, and that not all type of the tests are offline. Like, please, either make that all type of the tests are offline or online. Like, don't change your decision on the fly, please, that would be awesome. Anyway, there are 2 more weeks to study left, and then it will follow with a short break and an exam session. Still doing my best to ace this semester with a lot of plans for the new one. And thank you for being here with me with my long monologue about this type of combined studies. And once again, see you and hear you next week.